A woman's ordinary morning takes a shocking turn when a stranger calls her by a nickname only her deceased father ever used. What seems like an impossible coincidence quickly spirals into something far more mysterious as more strangers recognize her. As she digs into her father's past, she uncovers secrets he took to his grave. Secrets that will forever change everything she thought she knew about herself and her family. What really happened 30 years ago? And why are strangers suddenly calling her Firefly? Lily Morgan stared at the menu board above the counter, though she wasn't really reading it. She'd ordered the same thing she always did, a medium coffee with room for cream. The line at Been There Done That moved slowly this Monday morning, which was fine with Lily. She wasn't in any hurry to get to the library where she worked. These days, nothing seemed urgent anymore. 3 months. It had been 3 months since her father's funeral. 3 months since she'd moved back to Cedar Springs, the small town where she grew up. 3 months of living in her apartment, surrounded by boxes she still hadn't unpacked, plus more boxes from her dad's house that she couldn't bring herself to sort through. Next, please. Lily blinked, realizing she was now at the front of the line. She hadn't seen this barista before. He was middle-aged with salt and pepper hair, laugh lines around his eyes, and a friendly smile. His name tag read James. "Good morning," he said. "What can I get for you today?" "Just a medium coffee with room for cream, please." Lily dug into her purse for her wallet. James grabbed a paper cup and a marker. "Name for the order?" "Lily." "Coming right up." While James prepared her coffee, Lily glanced around the coffee shop. Not much had changed since she was in high school. Same worn wooden tables, same local artwork on the walls, same smell of coffee beans and cinnamon. Cedar Springs was the kind of town where things stayed the same, which was both comforting and suffocating. "Here you go, Firefly. 1 medium coffee, with room for cream." Lily's hand froze midway to the cup. The world seemed to tilt around her. A rushing sound filled her ears. "What did you call me?" Her voice came out as a whisper. James looked confused. "I said, 'Here's your coffee.' Is something wrong?" "No, you called me something else. You called me Firefly." James's eyebrows pulled together. "I don't think I did. I'm sorry if I said something that upset you, but I heard you." Lily's heart hammered in her chest. "That's what my father called me. Only my father. Nobody else ever used that nickname." A line was forming behind her now. James glanced nervously at the growing crowd. "I'm really sorry, but I definitely didn't call you any nickname. Just, here's your coffee." "Maybe you misheard me?" Lily stared at him. His expression seemed genuinely bewildered. Had she imagined it? Was grief playing tricks on her mind now? "Right. Sorry." She took her coffee with a shaking hand and moved to the cream and sugar station. As she stirred cream into her coffee, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she had heard correctly. Firefly, the special name her dad had given her when she was 5 years old and afraid of the dark. He had taken her outside one summer night to show her the fireflies in their backyard, telling her that she was like them, a small light that could shine in the darkness. "You bring light wherever you go, Firefly," he told her. "Remember that when you're scared." For 30 years, he was the only person who ever called her that. And now he was gone, his voice silenced forever. So how had this stranger, this barista she'd never met before, known to call her by that name? Lily glanced back at the counter. James was taking another customer's order, acting completely normal. He didn't look like someone who had just said something strange or meaningful. He looked like a man doing his job on an ordinary Monday morning. Outside the coffee shop, Lily paused on the sidewalk. The October air was crisp, and red and gold leaves drifted down from the maple trees that lined Main Street. Her dad had loved autumn. Nature's fireworks, he'd called it. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe she needed to talk to someone professional about her grief. It wasn't normal to hear things that weren't said, to imagine strangers calling you by a dead man's pet name. For you. Lily took a deep breath and began walking toward the library. 3 blocks away, the old brick building stood solid and reassuring. Books had always been her escape, her comfort. Working there had seemed like the perfect job when she moved back to Cedar Springs after her father's heart attack. Now she wondered if it had been a mistake to come back at all. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Emma. "Lunch today. I can escape the office at 12:30. Lily texted back, "Yes, please. Something weird just happened. We'll tell you later." The library was quiet when she arrived, just as she liked it. Mrs. Peterson, the head librarian who had worked there since Lily was a child, looked up from the front desk. "Good morning, Lily. There's a cart of returns that need shelving in the children's section. I'll get right on it." The familiar routine of shelving books calmed Lily's nerves. She moved through the colorful children's section, sliding books into their proper places. Dr. Seuss, Eric Carle, Maurice Sendak, books her father had read to her over and over when she was little. "Your mom loved these books too," he'd told her once. Lily had so few memories of her mother, who died when she was 3. Just a vague impression of warm hugs and the smell of lavender. When Lily finished with the children's books, she moved to the adult fiction section. As she shelved a mystery novel, her mind returned to the coffee shop incident. She was certain, almost certain, that she'd heard the barista call her Firefly. But how could he have known that name? She had never seen him before today, unless... Had he known her father? Cedar Springs was a small town of just over 5,000 people. Many families had lived here for generations. It was possible James had known her dad somehow. Maybe her father had mentioned the nickname, and James had used it without thinking. But if that was the case, why would he deny it? Lily slid the last book into place on the shelf and rolled the empty cart back to the circulation desk. Her head was starting to ache from going around in circles with these questions. "Lily, would you mind helping Mr. Grayson find some books on woodworking?" Mrs. Peterson asked. "He's over by the reference section." Of course. Lily pushed thoughts of the coffee shop out of her mind and focused on helping the elderly man find woodworking guides. For the rest of the morning, she stayed busy with library tasks, but underneath her calm exterior, questions bubbled like a pot about to boil over. By the time her lunch break arrived, Lily had almost convinced herself that she had imagined the whole thing. Grief did strange things to a person's mind. She'd been missing her father so much lately, especially with all those boxes of his things waiting at home, silent reminders of the life now ended. It would be natural for her tired brain to play tricks on her, to let her hear what she most longed to hear, her father's special name for her, spoken one more time. Yes, that had to be it. A trick of the mind. Nothing more. But as Lily grabbed her coat and purse to meet Emma for lunch, a small, persistent voice in the back of her mind whispered, "But what if it wasn't?" The Bluebird Cafe was only a 5-minute walk from the library. Lily spotted Emma already seated at their usual corner table, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, scrolling through her phone. Emma had been Lily's best friend since 3rd grade, when Emma defended Lily against playground bullies who made fun of her for not having a mom. "There you are." Emma looked up with a smile that quickly faded. "Whoa, you look like you've seen A ghost. Lily slid into the chair across from her friend. Maybe I have. After they ordered club sandwich for Emma, soup for Lily, Lily told Emma about the strange incident at the coffee shop that morning. Emma listened without interrupting, her forehead creased with concern. "So you're absolutely sure this guy called you Firefly?" Emma asked when Lily finished. "I thought I was. Now, I don't know." Lily stirred her spoon in the tomato soup that had just arrived. "The more I think about it, the more I wonder if I imagined it." Emma reached across the table and squeezed Lily's hand. "Lil, you've been through a lot. Grief can do weird things to your mind." "I know, but it seemed so real. I heard him clearly." "Did you recognize this barista from somewhere? Maybe he's someone who knew your dad?" Lily shook her head. "I've never seen him before. He must be new in town." They ate in silence for a few minutes. Outside the cafe window, leaves skittered. Across the sidewalk in a gust of autumn wind. "Remember when your dad used to take us camping at Lake Aurora?" Emma said suddenly. "And he always brought those special marshmallows for s'mores?" Lily smiled despite herself. "The jumbo ones. And he'd tell us scary stories that weren't actually that scary, because he'd always make the monster turn out to be friendly in the end." Was the best. Emma's eyes grew soft. "I miss him too, you know." "I know." Lily pushed her half-finished soup away. "Sometimes I think I see him places. Like, I'll catch a glimpse of someone who looks like him from behind. And my heart stops for a second before I remember." "That's normal," Emma assured her. "My grandma died 3 years ago, and sometimes I still think I hear her laugh in a crowded room." A memory surfaced in Lily's mind. Her father teaching her to ride a bike without training wheels when she was 6. She had been so afraid of falling. "You can do it, Firefly," he'd encouraged. "Just keep pedaling and don't look down." When she finally rode all the way down the street by herself, he'd cheered louder than any parent at her school's sports events. "That's my girl! I knew you could. Fly!" Her father had always been her biggest cheerleader, her safety net, her best friend. After her mother died, a tragedy Lily barely remembered, it had been just the two of them against the world. He'd never remarried, devoting himself to raising Lily instead. "Have you started going through his things yet?" Emma asked, interrupting Lily's thoughts. "Not really. I sorted through some of his clothes last week, but..." Lily's voice trailed off. "There's so much. 35 years of life packed into that house. I don't even know where to start. Want me to help this weekend? We could tackle it together." "Maybe." Lily wasn't sure she was ready. Every item in her father's house held memories, stories. Going through his belongings meant accepting that he would never again wear that sweater with the hole in the elbow, or read that dog-eared paperback, or use that chipped coffee mug he refused to throw away. "I should probably do it soon," she admitted. "I can't keep paying rent on my apartment and the mortgage on his house forever." "No pressure. Just know I'm here when you're ready." After lunch, Emma headed back to the insurance office where she worked, and Lily returned to the library. The afternoon dragged by as Lily helped patrons find books, organized a display for the upcoming Halloween celebration, and tried to focus on anything except the barista who may or may not have called her Firefly. When her shift ended at 5, Lily found herself driving not to her apartment, but to her father's house on Maple Street. The modest 2-story home with its peeling blue paint and wraparound porch had been her childhood home until she left for college. Now, it stood quiet and empty, a time capsule of memories frozen in place. Lily parked in the driveway and sat in her car for several minutes, gathering courage. Finally, she grabbed her keys and approached the front door. Inside, the house smelled, musty from being closed up. Dust motes danced in the beams of fading sunlight that streamed through the living room windows. Lily flipped on lights as she moved through the house, as if illuminating the spaces might somehow make them less lonely. In the kitchen, everything remained exactly as her father had left it. A coffee mug in the dish drainer, a notepad by the row, phone with a grocery list in his messy handwriting. A calendar on the wall still turned to July, the month he died, with Lily's visit circled on the weekend she had planned to come home. The visit that had turned into a funeral instead. Lily opened the refrigerator out of habit, then closed it quickly when the smell of spoiled food hit her. She should have cleaned that out weeks ago. She made a mental note to bring garbage bags next time. Climbing the stairs to the second floor, Lily paused at the framed photos that lined the stairwell. Her school pictures from kindergarten through high school, her college graduation, her and her father on fishing trips, at amusement parks, building a snowman in the front yard, and one faded photograph at the top of the stairs. Her mother holding baby Lily, both of them smiling at the camera. Her father had told her this was taken just a few months before her mother's death. Lily had her mother's red hair and green eyes, her slender build and small nose. Looking at the photo was like seeing a version of herself from a parallel universe. One where her mother had lived, and Lily had grown up with two parents instead of one. In her father's bedroom, cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, the beginnings of Lily's half-hearted attempt to sort through his belongings. His bed was still unmade, the plaid comforter rumpled on one side as if he had just gotten up. Lily sat on the edge of the bed and ran her hand over the empty pillow. "I miss you, Dad," she whispered to the quiet room. "I don't know how to do this without you." No answer came, of course, just the faint tick of the alarm clock on the nightstand and the occasional creaking of the old house settling. Lily lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, remembering all the times she had crawled into this bed as a child, after having a nightmare. Her father would always make room for her, telling her stories until she fell asleep again. "Nothing can hurt you while I'm here, Firefly," he would say. "I'll always keep you safe." But who would keep her safe now? Who would call her Firefly and remind her that she could shine in the darkness? As the shadows lengthened across the bedroom floor, Lily closed her eyes and tried to imagine what her father would say about this morning's strange incident. Would he laugh it off? Tell her she was being silly? Or would his eyes grow serious, the way they did when something important was happening? One thing was certain. If her father were here, he would know exactly what to do. He always did. Lily must have fallen asleep on her father's bed, because when she opened her eyes again, the room was dark except for the glow of streetlights through the window. She sat up, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. The clock on the nightstand showed 8:37 p.m. With a sigh, Lily got up and straightened the comforter where she had wrinkled it. She wasn't ready to sort through her father's things tonight. Maybe this weekend, when Emma could help. For now, she just wanted to go home, take a hot shower, and try to forget about baristas who called her by impossible nicknames. The rest of the week passed in a blur of work and restless sleep. Lily avoided been there, done that, buying her morning coffee from the gas station instead. She told herself she was just saving time, but deep down, she knew she was afraid. Afraid of what she might hear, or worse, what she might not hear. Friday evening, Lily had almost convinced herself that Monday's incident had been a product of grief and lack of sleep. She had been working extra shifts at the library to avoid going home to her empty apartment or her father's empty house. Mrs. Peterson had noticed her exhaustion and insisted she take the weekend off. "The books will still be here on Monday," the older woman said firmly. "Go get some rest, dear." So, when Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, Lily decided to catch up on errands. She made a list: grocery shopping, pick up dry cleaning, stop by the bank, maybe finally unpack some of those boxes in her apartment. The local supermarket, Fielding's Grocery, was busy with weekend shoppers. Lily grabbed a cart and began working through her list. In the produce section, she picked up an apple and automatically checked it for bruises, hearing her father's voice in her head. "Always check your apples, Firefly. One bad spot ruins the whole thing." A lump formed in her throat. Even the simplest tasks carried echoes of him. She continued through the store, adding items to her cart. In the frozen foods aisle, she hesitated over the ice cream. Her father had loved mint chocolate chip. She hadn't bought any since he died. After a moment, she added a pint to her cart, a small tribute to him. As Lily turned her cart toward the dairy section, she accidentally bumped into an elderly woman examining the yogurt display. "I'm so sorry," Lily said. "I wasn't looking where I was going." "No harm done, dear." The woman turned, her white hair neatly styled, her eyes bright blue behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a lavender sweater and pearl earrings, looking like someone's kind grandmother. The woman's gaze lingered on Lily's face, her expression shifting from polite dismissal to keen interest. "Oh," she said softly, "you must be Firefly. You have his eyes." Lily's heart stuttered. The carton of eggs she had just picked up slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor with a cracking sound, but she barely noticed. "What did you say?" she managed to whisper. The elderly woman smiled, apparently not noticing Lily's shock. Such a lovely shade of green, just like Robert's. Robert, her father's name. "How do you know my father?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "And how do you know that name?" But the woman was already moving away, pushing her cart around the corner into the next aisle. Lily abandoned her own cart and hurried after her, heart pounding. "Wait, please," she called. When she turned the corner, the aisle was empty, except for a teenage boy looking at potato chips and a young mother with a baby in her cart. The elderly woman had vanished. Lily checked the next aisle, then the next. She circled the entire grocery store, searching every section, but the woman in the lavender sweater was nowhere to be found. At the front of the store, Lily approached the manager, a balding man named Steve who had worked at Fielding's since she was a child. "Steve, did you see an elderly woman leave just now? White hair, blue eyes, lavender sweater, pearl earrings?" Steve frowned thoughtfully. "Can't say that I have. We've got a few regular customers who might fit that description, though. Mrs. Jenkins shops here every Saturday, but she uses a walker these days, and Mrs. Thornton usually comes in on Tuesdays. This woman didn't have a walker. She moved quickly, actually." Lily bit her lip. "She knew my father, I think. Called him Robert. Well, half the town knew your dad," Steve said kindly. "He was a good man, your father. We all miss him around here." Lily thanked him and went back to retrieve her abandoned cart. Someone had already cleaned up the broken eggs and replaced them with a fresh carton. Small-town courtesy at its finest. As she finished her shopping, Lily's mind raced. This wasn't like Monday's incident, where she might have misheard the barista. The elderly woman had definitely called her Firefly and mentioned her father by name. And those words, "You have his eyes," spoken with such familiarity. Who was this woman? How did she know Lily's nickname? And where had she disappeared to so quickly? By the time Lily loaded her groceries into her car, she was no closer to answers. But one thing was certain. She hadn't imagined it this time. Something strange was happening, and it was connected to her father somehow. Back at her apartment, Lily put away her groceries and then sat at her small kitchen table with a notepad. At the top of the page, she wrote "Firefly" in capital letters and underlined it twice. Below that, she made 2 columns: "Coffee shop guy" and "elderly woman." Under "coffee shop guy," she wrote, "Called me Firefly, denied it. Never met him before, his name is James." Under "elderly woman," she wrote, "Definitely called me Firefly, knew my father's name, said I have his eyes disappeared before I could talk to her. Never." Met her before, Lily stared at the page, trying to find connections. Both strangers had called her by her father's nickname for her. Both were people she'd never met before. But the woman had clearly acknowledged knowing her father, while the barista had seemed genuinely confused. What was the link? Lily tapped, her pen against the table, then added another note under "Coffee shop guy." Check if he knew Dad. Her cell phone rang, startling her. It was Emma. "Hey, I was thinking of bringing over pizza and wine tonight," Emma said when Lily answered. "I've had the week from hell at work, and I need friend time. You in?" "Definitely," Lily said. "But Emma, something weird happened again today." "Weird how?" Emma's voice sharpened with concern. "I'll tell you when you get here. It's too complicated." For the phone. After they hung up, Lily looked back at her notes. Maybe Emma would have some insight. 2 incidents in 1 week couldn't be coincidence, could they? Lily got up and went to the window, looking out at the tree-lined street below. The maple trees were at their peak autumn color, blazing red and gold against the clear blue sky. Another beautiful fall day in Cedar Springs. Everything looked so normal, so ordinary, but nothing felt normal anymore. It was as if her father's death had cracked open some door, allowing strangeness to seep into her life. And now, with this second encounter, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening. Something her father would have understood. She just wished she knew what that something was. "No way," Emma said, her pizza slice halfway to her mouth. "She actually called you Firefly? Like, straight up?" Lily nodded, curled up on her couch, with her own slice untouched on the plate. "And then mentioned my dad by name. Said I have his eyes. Okay, that's definitely weird." Emma took a thoughtful bite. "And you've never seen this woman before?" "Never. At least, I don't think so." Lily frowned. She looked like a typical grandmother type. "Maybe I've passed her on the street before, but we've never spoken." And then she just vanished? That's some Twilight Zone stuff right there. Lily reached for her wine glass. "I know how it sounds. If you told me this story, I'd think you were exaggerating. But Emma, I swear it happened exactly like I said." "I believe you," Emma said quickly. "It's just strange, that's all. First the barista, now this mystery woman, both calling you by your dad's special nickname for you." "Exactly. It can't be coincidence." Emma set down her pizza and wiped her hands on a napkin. "Okay, let's think this through logically. What connects these 2 people? Besides knowing my childhood nickname, nothing that I can figure out." Lily sighed. "I've never seen either of them before this week. Maybe they're new in town but knew your dad from somewhere else? Did he ever live anywhere besides Cedar Springs?" Lily considered this. "He moved here when I was a baby. I think he lived in Riverdale before that, where he met my mom. But that was over 30 years ago. Did he ever mention old friends from Riverdale? People he stayed in touch with?" Not that I remember. Lily's brow furrowed. Dad didn't talk much about his life before Cedar Springs. I always assumed it was because those memories were tied to my mom, and it was too painful for him to bring up. That makes sense. Emma picked up another slice of pizza. But maybe there's more to it. Maybe there are people from his past who've suddenly shown up in Cedar Springs, and they know things about your dad, and you, that you don't know. The thought sent a shiver down Lily's spine. But why now? Why 3 months after he died? I don't know. Emma leaned forward. But I think you need to find out. They spent the rest of the evening brainstorming, making lists of people to talk to who might have known Lily's father well. Neighbors, co-workers from the hardware store where he'd worked until retirement, fellow members of the town's volunteer fire department. And tomorrow, Emma announced as she gathered her purse to leave, we're going to your dad's house to search for clues, old letters, photos, journals, anything that might tell us more about his life before Cedar Springs. You don't have to help, Lily protested. I know you're busy. Are you kidding? This is the most interesting thing that's happened in Cedar Springs since Tyler Matthews drove his tractor through the high school gym. Emma hugged her friend. Besides, you shouldn't have to do this alone. After Emma left, Lily couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the elderly woman's words. You must be Firefly. You have his eyes. Not just recognition, but certainty. The woman had been looking for her, or at least had been prepared to see her. The next morning, Lily woke early, determination replacing her confusion. Emma was right. The answers must be somewhere in her father's house. She texted Emma to meet her there at 9, then showered and dressed quickly. The house looked different in the bright morning light. Less like a shrine to her grief, more like what it was. A home full of memories and secrets waiting to be discovered. Emma arrived with coffee and donuts. Fuel for our investigation, she explained, setting them on the kitchen counter. So, where do we start? I've been thinking about that, Lily said, sipping her coffee. Dad kept most of his important papers in his desk in the study. But if we're looking for old stuff, things from before he moved to Cedar Springs, I think the attic is our best bet. The attic stairs creaked as they climbed them, dust motes dancing in the beams of light from the small window at the far end. The space was crowded but neat. Robert Morgan had been an organized man, even in his storage areas. Boxes were labeled and stacked methodically. Christmas decorations, Lily's school projects, camping gear. Your dad even labeled his attic boxes. Meanwhile, my attic looks like a tornado hit a thrift store, Emma commented, scanning the labels. For an hour, they searched through boxes that might contain clues to Robert's past. They found photo albums of Lily's childhood, old tax records, instruction manuals for appliances the house no longer contained. Look at this, Emma said suddenly, pulling out a faded Polaroid from a box marked fishing gear. Is this your mom? Lily took the photo. A young woman with red hair laughed at the camera, holding up a fish on a line. Next to her stood a much younger version of Lily's father, his arm around her waist, looking at her with undisguised adoration. Yeah, Lily said softly. That's her, Sarah Morgan. You look exactly like her, Emma observed. Dad always said that too. Lily carefully placed the photo in her pocket. She had so few pictures of her mother. Each one was precious. They continued searching, moving deeper into the attic. Behind a stack of boxes containing old winter coats, Lily spotted a box she'd never seen before. Unlike the others, this one had only a single word written on the side in her father's handwriting. Before. Emma, help me with this one. Together they pulled the box free and set it on a clear spot on the attic floor. When Lily lifted the lid, dust billowed up, making them both sneeze. Inside were items Lily had never seen before. A leather-bound journal, envelopes of old photographs, newspaper clippings, a folded firefighter's uniform. "Dad was a volunteer firefighter here in Cedar Springs," Lily said, lifting the uniform. "But this looks different." She unfolded it to reveal a patch on the sleeve. "Riverdale Fire Department." "So he was a firefighter in Riverdale too," Emma said, "before he moved here." Lily nodded, setting the uniform aside and picking up the journal. The pages were filled with her father's familiar handwriting, dated entries beginning 20 years before she was born. She flipped through it, scanning entries that detailed his work at the Riverdale Fire Department, friendships with his fellow firefighters, and eventually meeting Sarah, the new nurse at Riverdale General Hospital. "Listen to this," Lily said, reading from an entry dated June 15th, 36 years ago. "Dinner with Sarah tonight. She's unlike anyone I've ever met. When she laughs, the whole room lights up. Thompson says I'm already in too deep, but I don't care. I think she might be the one." "Thompson?" Emma repeated. "Who's that?" Lily flipped back through earlier entries. "Looks like Michael Thompson was one of Dad's fellow firefighters, his best friend, from the way Dad writes about him." She continued scanning the journal. "They did everything together. Fishing trips, double dates, even bought a lake house together." Lily turned to a stack of photos in the box. Men in firefighter uniforms standing in front of a red truck. Her father and a tall, dark-haired man holding fishing rods by a lake. The same dark-haired man at what looked like a Christmas party, arms slung around her father's shoulders. "This must be Thompson," Lily said, showing Emma the photos. They were close. She kept reading the journal, tracing her father's life in Riverdale, his promotion to captain at the fire department, his whirlwind romance with Sarah, their wedding, buying their first house. And then, entries about Sarah's pregnancy, her parents' joy at learning they were having a baby. But strangely, the journal entries stopped abruptly around the time Lily would have been born. The last few pages had been torn out, leaving ragged edges in the binding. "That's odd," Lily murmured. "Why would he tear out those pages?" "Maybe they were too painful," Emma suggested. "If they were about your mom's death, maybe." Lily wasn't convinced. Her father had written about difficult things elsewhere in the journal. A child who died in a house fire, a friend's cancer diagnosis. He hadn't torn those pages out. She searched the box for more clues. At the bottom, buried under old letters, she found a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local family struck by tragedy." Lily's hands trembled as she read the short article, dated just a few weeks after her 3rd birthday. Riverdale resident Sarah Morgan, 29, died suddenly on Saturday from cardiac arrest. She leaves behind her husband, Fire Captain Robert Morgan, and daughter. The family has requested privacy during this difficult time. "That's all it says," Lily whispered. "Nothing about how or why she had a heart attack at 29. No details. At all." "Small-town papers," Emma said. "They probably kept it vague out of respect." "I guess." Lily folded the clipping carefully and set it aside. As she continued examining the contents of the box, the image of the elderly woman from the grocery store kept flashing in her mind. Had this woman known her parents in Riverdale? Had she known Lily as a baby before her mother died and her father moved them to Cedar Springs? It seemed the most likely explanation. But how had the woman recognized Lily after all these years? And why had she called her Firefly, a nickname her father hadn't given her until they lived in Cedar Springs when she was 5? Lily reached the bottom of the box and found a small cardboard photo album. Opening it, she gasped. "Emma, look at this." The first photo showed a hospital room. In the bed lay Lily's mother, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a newborn baby, wrapped in a pink blanket. Beside her sat Lily's father, also holding a pink blanketed bundle. "Two babies," Emma breathed. "Lily, did you have a twin?" "Not that I know of," Lily replied, confused. "Dad never mentioned a twin. Ever." She turned the page. More photos of two identical babies, then toddlers in matching dresses. The last photo showed her mother holding two little girls, about 3 years old, both with red pigtails and gap-toothed smiles. On the back, written in her father's handwriting, "Sarah with the girls, last day at the lake." Lily stared at the photo, her mind reeling. She had a twin sister. A twin sister, her father, had never once mentioned in her entire life. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Where is she? What happened to her? Why would Dad keep this secret from me?" Emma put her arm around Lily's shoulders. "I don't know, but we're going to find out." Lily carefully gathered the journal, the photos, and the newspaper clipping. After 32 years of believing she was an only child, she had discovered she was a twin. And somewhere in these documents, in the journal pages her father had torn out, in the vague newspaper announcement of her mother's death, in the photos that stopped when Lily was 3, lay the answers to the mystery. A mystery that somehow connected to strangers calling her Firefly in a small town 30 years later. Lily barely slept that night. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the photograph of the twin toddlers, herself and a sister she had no memory of. A sister her father had never mentioned, not once in 32 years. By morning, Lily had more questions than answers. What had happened to her twin? Had she died along with their mother? If so, why hadn't her father ever told her? And if not, if her twin was still alive somewhere, why had they been separated? "We need to make a plan," Emma said over breakfast at Lily's apartment. She had stayed over, neither of them wanting to be alone after their discovery. "First, let's write down everything we know for sure." Lily nodded, pulling out a notebook. "Okay, I had a twin sister. We were both alive at age 3, based on that last photo labeled Last Day at the Lake. Around that time, my mother died suddenly of a heart attack, and Dad moved us, or just me, to Cedar Springs. And your father never mentioned your twin. To anyone, as far as we know," Emma added. "I've known you since 3rd grade, and I never heard anything about a sister." "Neither did I. Which means either my twin died too, or—" Lily couldn't finish the sentence. "Or they were separated for some reason," Emma completed gently. "And your dad decided never to tell you." Lily tapped her pen against the notebook. "But why? What reason could he possibly have had to keep this from me my entire life?" "I don't know." Emma hesitated. "But, Lily, whatever the reason, I'm sure your dad thought he was doing the right thing. He loved you more than anything." "Did he?" Lily's voice cracked. "If he loved me, how could he keep something this huge from me? I had a sister, Emma, a twin sister. That's not something you just forget to mention." Emma reached across the table and squeezed Lily's hand. "I know you're hurt and confused. You have every right to be. But let's focus on finding answers first, okay? We can try to understand your dad's reasons later." Lily took a deep breath and nodded. "You're right. So, what's our next step?" "Well, you mentioned a Michael Thompson in your dad's journal, his best friend from Riverdale. If anyone would know what happened, it would be him." "Good point." Lily opened her laptop. "Let's see if we can find him." They spent the next hour searching online for Michael Thompson. The name was common enough that they found dozens of possibilities, but none that seemed connected to Riverdale Fire Department or to Lily's father. "Wait," Lily said suddenly. "Remember when we went to that museum exhibit last year? The one about the history of firefighting in the region?" Emma nodded. "At the Regional History Museum in Oakville?" "Yes." The curator was this older man who seemed to know everything about every fire department within 100 miles. "What if we start there?" They found the museum's website and discovered that the curator was indeed named Michael Thompson. His biography mentioned 30 years of service with various fire departments in the region before retiring to become a historian. "That has to be him," Lily said excitedly. "Dad's friend!" The museum's hours showed it was open today from 10 a.m. to a closing ceremony at 4 p.m. "It's already 11:30, Emma noted. "If we leave now, we can be there by 1:30. The drive to Oakville took just over an hour. Lily spent most of it quiet, staring out the window at the passing autumn landscape. Her mind kept returning to the photos of the twin girls, trying to dredge up memories she didn't have. Had her father ever slipped and called her sister's name by mistake? Had there been empty spaces in their house where another child's belongings should have been? Had there been moments when he looked at her with sadness, perhaps seeing her missing twin in her face? She couldn't remember anything that would have hinted at a sister's existence. But then, she had been only 3 when whatever happened. Most people didn't have clear memories from that age. The Regional History Museum was housed in a renovated firehouse, its red brick exterior preserved from the original 1920s structure. A banner across the entrance announced, "Final Week, Heroes. Among Us, a Century of Firefighting." The clerk said the curator is out at a conference. The young woman at the front desk informed them when they asked for Michael Thompson. She couldn't have been more than 20, with a name tag that read Zoe. "Do you know when he'll be back?" Lily asked, trying to hide her disappointment. "Not until next week." Zoe smiled apologetically. "The exhibit is closing after today, and we're packing everything up for storage tomorrow." "Is there any way to reach him? It's really important." Lily fidgeted with her purse strap. "It's about family matters. I can take your information and ask him to call you when he returns," Zoe offered. Lily nodded and began writing her name and phone number on the paper Zoe provided. As she wrote, she heard the receptionist make a small sound of appreciation. "That's a beautiful necklace," Zoe said. "Is it a dragonfly?" Lily's hand went to the silver pendant at her throat. A delicate dragonfly with tiny green stones for eyes. "Yes. My father gave it to me for my 16th birthday. It's lovely. Thank you. It's special to me because of a nickname he gave me." Lily paused, glancing at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. "He called me Firefly." Zoe's expression remained politely interested, showing no hint of recognition. "That's a sweet nickname. What was the connection to a dragonfly, though?" "Oh, I always got dragonflies and fireflies mixed up as a kid. Dad thought it was funny, so he got me this as a joke. But a sweet one." The young woman smiled. "That's really nice. I'll make sure Mr. Thompson gets your information as soon as he's back." Outside the museum, Lily turned to Emma. "Well, that was a bust." "Not necessarily," Emma said as they walked back to the car. "We know Thompson works here, and we can come back next week. Plus, I grabbed a museum brochure with staff, contacts. There might be another way to reach him." In the car, Emma flipped through the brochure. "Look, it lists the museum's board members. There's a Patricia Thompson listed as board secretary. Could be his wife." "Worth a shot," Lily agreed. "What else does the brochure say?" "Not much about staff, but there's a section about the museum's history. It says it was founded 15 years ago by a group of retired firefighters who wanted to preserve the region's firefighting heritage. Emma continued reading. The main benefactor was the family of John Blackwood, who died saving children from a school fire in 1987. Lily's head snapped up. Blackwood? That name was in Dad's journal. I think he and Dad worked together at Riverdale Fire Department. So, there's definitely a connection here. Emma folded the brochure. Even if we can't talk to Thompson today, we're on the right track. They decided to explore the museum while they were there. The exhibit chronicled the evolution of firefighting equipment, tactics, and notable fires in the region over the past century. Lily scanned each display, looking for any mention of her father or Riverdale Fire Department. In a section about the 1980s, she found what she was looking for: a group photo of Riverdale's firefighters. Her father stood in the front row, young and proud in his uniform. Beside him was a tall man with dark hair that Lily recognized from the photos in the attic box: Michael Thompson. Emma, look. Lily pointed to the photo. That's him. That's Thompson. They read the caption beneath the photo. Riverdale Fire Department, 1986. Front row, L to R. Captain Robert Morgan, Lieutenant Michael Thompson, John Blackwood, David Chen. So we're definitely in the right place, Emma said. Your dad was captain, and Thompson was his lieutenant. As they continued through the exhibit, Lily's phone buzzed with a text from her boss at the library, asking if she could cover a shift tomorrow. She quickly replied yes, then put her phone away. I should probably get back to Cedar Springs soon, she told Emma. I've got work tomorrow. Let's check the rest of the exhibit first, Emma suggested. There might be more clues. The final section of the exhibit focused on fallen heroes, firefighters who had died in the line of duty. Lily's stomach clenched as she approached it, suddenly afraid she might find her father's name or photo among the memorials. But Robert Morgan wasn't listed. Instead, she found a large photo of John Blackwood, the firefighter mentioned in the brochure. The caption described how he had died rescuing children from a burning elementary school in 1987. That must have been devastating for the department, Emma murmured. Including your dad and Thompson. Lily nodded, trying to imagine how it would feel to lose a colleague and friend that way. Had that tragedy played some role in whatever happened to her family? The timing was close, just a year or two before her mother's death and the disappearance of her twin. As they were about to leave, Lily spotted a visitor comment book near the exit. On impulse, she wrote, "Looking for information about Robert Morgan, Riverdale FD, 1980s. Please contact his daughter." She added her phone number, then closed the book. Long shot? Emma asked. Worth trying, Lily replied. On the drive back to Cedar Springs, they discussed their next steps. They would return to the museum next week to speak with Michael Thompson. In the meantime, they would continue searching through Robert's belongings for more clues. I still don't understand how this connects to people calling me Firefly now, Lily said, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. That nickname came years after we moved to Cedar Springs. I don't know, Emma admitted, but we're getting closer to answers. I can feel it. Lily hoped her friend was right, because with every new piece of information they uncovered, the mystery only seemed to deepen, and her confusion about who her father really was and why he had kept so many secrets only grew. Sunday evening. After Emma dropped her off, Lily spread the contents of the before box across her living room floor. She examined each photograph more carefully, looking for clues she might have missed. Most were typical family snapshots: picnics, holidays, fishing trips. In many of them, her father posed with the same group of men, presumably his fellow firefighters from Riverdale. One photo in particular kept drawing Lily's attention. It showed her father and Thompson standing on a dock in front of a rustic cabin, fishing poles in hand, both grinning widely. On the back, her father had written, "Lake House, Summer 1985, Best Catch Ever." Lily studied Thompson's face. He was tall and lean with dark hair and what her father's journal had described as a troublemaker's smile. There was something vaguely familiar about him, but Lily couldn't place why. She'd never met him, as far as she knew. As she examined the background of the photo more closely, she noticed details of the lake house. A distinctive stone chimney, green shutters, a weather vane shaped like a fish on the roof. It looked peaceful, the kind of place where happy memories were made. Had she been there as a child? Had her twin? Lily was still pondering this when her phone chimed with a text from Emma. "Any new discoveries?" "Not really," Lily replied. "Just looking at photos from Dad's box again." "Get some sleep," Emma texted back. "Work tomorrow, remember?" Lily sighed and began gathering the photos, careful to return them to the box in the same order she'd found them. As she picked up the lake house photo for one last look, something clicked in her mind. The man in the photo, Thompson, looked familiar because he resembled someone Lily had seen recently, someone with the same tall build, the same shape of face, though decades younger. James, the barista who had called her Firefly. Lily's heart raced as she compared the lake house photo to her memory of the coffee shop man. Could James be related to Thompson? A son, perhaps? The resemblance wasn't perfect, but it was strong enough to notice. If James was Thompson's son, that might explain how he knew her childhood nickname. Maybe Thompson had told stories about her father, about Little Firefly. But why would James deny calling her that? And why would both he and the elderly woman from the grocery store use the nickname in the same week, after no one had called her that for years? Too keyed up to sleep, Lily decided she would return to Been There, Done That tomorrow morning. She needed to talk to James again, to ask him directly if he was related to Michael Thompson. It was the only lead she had, until Thompson himself returned from his conference. Monday morning arrived with a chilly rain that matched Lily's mood. She dressed quickly, choosing a green sweater that her father had always said matched her eyes. Her father, who had lied to her for her entire life. The thought still stung, though her anger was now mixed with curiosity and a desperate need for answers. The coffee shop was busy when Lily arrived, a line of customers seeking warmth and caffeine before starting their workday. Lily scanned the baristas behind the counter, but James wasn't among them. Instead, a college-aged girl with purple hair and a nose ring took orders while an older woman prepared drinks. Lily got in line, rehearsing what she would say. When she reached the counter, she ordered her usual coffee, then added, "Is James working today?" The purple-haired barista, her name tag read Meg, shook her head. "He only works mornings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, plus Saturday afternoons." Oh, Lily tried to hide her disappointment. "Do you know his last name? I think he might be related to someone I know." Meg hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the question. "We're not really supposed to give out personal information about employees." "I understand," Lily said quickly. "It's just, I'm trying to get in touch with my father's old friend, and James might be his son." Meg seemed to consider this, then shrugged. "His last name is Thompson, if that helps. James Thompson." Lily's pulse quickened. "It does. Thank you." She paid for her coffee and moved to the side to wait for it, trying to process this confirmation. James Thompson. Almost certainly Michael Thompson's son. But that still didn't explain why he'd called her Firefly and then denied it. "Can I leave?" "My number for him?" Lily asked when Meg handed her the coffee. It's important that I speak with him. Sure. Meg gave her a small slip of paper. No promises he'll call, though. Lily wrote her name and number along with a brief message. Need to speak with you about Robert Morgan. Important. Please call. She handed it back to Meg, who tucked it under the register. I'll make sure he gets it, the barista promised. Tad Tutin, the library. Lily found it even harder than usual to focus on her work. Her mind kept replaying the coffee shop encounter with James, trying to remember exactly what he'd said, his exact expression when she'd questioned him about the nickname. Had he looked confused or uncomfortable? Had he genuinely not realized what he'd said? Or had he been pretending? By lunchtime, Lily had shelved the same books twice and apologized to 3 patrons for her distraction. Mrs. Peterson had given her concerned looks, but hadn't commented. When her phone vibrated in her pocket, Lily quickly stepped into the break room to check it, hoping James had already gotten her message. But it was just a news alert. No calls came that day or the next. On Wednesday, Lily considered going back to the coffee shop, but decided against it. She didn't want to appear desperate or stalkerish. Instead, she focused on work and spent her evenings searching online for more information about Michael Thompson, James Thompson, or anything related to Riverdale's firefighters in the 1980s. She found little beyond what they'd already discovered at the museum. Thompson had indeed retired from firefighting and become a curator focused on preserving the history of local fire departments. His biography on the museum website mentioned a distinguished career, but gave few personal details. Thursday morning, Lily woke with a sense of purpose. James would be working today, according to Meg. Rather than simply dropping by, Lily decided to wait until the morning rush would be over. She'd take a late morning break from the library and try to catch him when the coffee shop was quieter. At 10:30, Lily told Mrs. Peterson she needed to run a quick errand and walk the 3 blocks to Been There, Done That. The rain had stopped, but the air remained damp and cool, fallen leaves sticking to the sidewalk like colorful decals. Through the window, Lily could see that the coffee shop was nearly empty, and there, behind the counter, was James. Her heart skipped as she pushed open the door, setting the little bell jingling. James looked up at the sound, his expression changing from professional welcome to recognition to, was that nervousness? When he saw Lily. "Good morning," he said when she approached the counter. "Medium coffee with room for cream?" "You remember my order." Lily tried to keep her voice casual. "I'm good with regular customers." James rang up her order. "That'll be $3.25. As she handed him the money, Lily gathered her courage. "Did you get my message? I left my number with Meg on Monday." James nodded, not meeting her eyes. "I did. I'm sorry I didn't call. Things have been hectic. I'm opening a new architecture firm in town, and the permits are a nightmare." Architecture firm? This wasn't what Lily had expected. "So, the coffee shop job is temporary?" "Just until my office is set up." He handed her the change. "What did you want to talk about?" Lily glanced around. The few other customers were absorbed in their phones or laptops. "Is there somewhere we could talk for a minute? Privately?" James hesitated, then called to his co-worker. "Danny, can you cover the front for 5? I'm going to take my break." "You, Lily," he said. "We can sit at that corner table." Once they were seated with Lily's coffee between them, she pulled the lake house photograph from her purse and placed it on the table. "Do you recognize the man in this photo? The one standing next to my father?" James stared at the photo for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he looked up at Lily. "That's my father, Michael Thompson." "I thought so," Lily said softly. "You look like him." I've been told that. James's voice was careful, neutral. So, you knew who I was when I came in that day? You knew I was Robert Morgan's daughter? James shifted in his seat. Not at first. Not until you said your name. But you called me Firefly, a nickname only my father used. Lily leaned forward. Why? Did you deny it when I asked about it? I didn't. James stopped, running a hand through his hair. Look, I don't know what you're talking about. I never called you Firefly or any other nickname. I heard you clearly, Lily insisted. And it can't be a coincidence that you're Michael Thompson's son, working at a coffee shop I happened to visit, using a nickname only my father knew. Ms. Morgan. Lily. Lily, James corrected. I understand this is important to you, but I genuinely don't remember using any nickname. Maybe you misheard me. Maybe I mumbled something that sounded similar. Lily studied his face, looking for signs of deception. He seemed sincere, but there was something in his eyes, a guardedness, a careful distance, that made her doubt his complete honesty. Did you know my father? She asked. Not really. My dad talked about him sometimes, but they lost touch years ago. I never met him myself. And did your father ever mention that I had a twin sister? The question clearly caught James off guard. His eyes widened slightly before he composed his expression. A twin? No, I don't think so. But there had been that moment of surprise, of recognition. He knew something. I just found out myself, Lily said, watching him closely. My father never told me. I discovered photos of us as toddlers in a box in his attic. But I have no idea what happened to her or why he kept her existence a secret. James was silent, staring at the old photograph on the table. I'm trying to find my father's friend, your father, to see if he knows what happened, Lily continued. The museum said he's away at a conference. He is. James finally looked up. He's presenting at a firefighting history symposium in Chicago. He'll be back next week. Do you think he would be willing to talk to me about my father? About my family? James hesitated. I can ask him. But Lily, these are old stories, painful memories. Are you sure you want to dig into all this? I need to know the truth, Lily said firmly. I just found out I had a twin sister I never knew about. My whole life feels like a lie right now. Something flickered in James's eyes, compassion, or perhaps guilt. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number. I'll talk to my dad when he calls tonight and see what he says. Lily recited her number, hope rising in her chest. Thank you. James stood, tucking the phone back in his pocket. I should get back to work. But Lily? Yes? Whatever you find out, try to remember that people sometimes keep secrets because they think they're protecting the ones they love. With that, he returned to the counter, leaving Lily with her cooling coffee and the photograph of two young men who had once been best friends, two men who shared secrets she was only beginning to uncover. 3 days passed with no call from James. Lily checked her phone constantly, even during library hours when it was supposed to be silenced. Mrs. Peterson noticed her distraction, but simply assigned her to the back office, cataloging new arrivals away from patrons. You seem like you need some quiet time, the older woman said kindly. Everything all right at home? Just working through some family stuff, Lily replied, grateful for Mrs. Peterson's understanding. By Saturday morning, Lily's patience had worn thin. James would be working the afternoon shift, according to Meg. If he wasn't going to call her, she would confront him again in person. Want me to come with you? Emma asked when Lily called to update her. For moral support? No, I think it's better if I go alone. He might be more open to talking that way. Call me right after, okay? And be careful. Careful of what? Lily asked, surprised by Emma's tone. Emma hesitated. I don't know. It's just, this whole situation feels strange. People suddenly recognizing you, knowing things about you they shouldn't know. Your dad hiding the fact you had a sister. It's like something from a mystery novel. I know. But James is just a guy whose dad knew my dad. And the elderly woman was probably someone from Riverdale who recognized me because I look like my mother. Lily tried to sound more confident than she felt. I'll call you later. I promise. At 2:30 p.m., Lily entered Been There, Done That for the second time that week. The Saturday afternoon crowd was steady, but not overwhelming. James stood at the Italy espresso machine, focused on making a complicated drink. He wore a light blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up instead of the shop's standard black polo. Perhaps he had plans after his shift. Lily got in line, rehearsing what she would say. When she reached the counter, the same purple-haired barista from Monday greeted her. Medium coffee with room for cream? Meg asked, with a smile of recognition. Yes, please, Lily replied, then lowered her voice. And could you tell James I'd like to speak with him? When he has a minute. Meg glanced over her shoulder at James, then back to Lily. Sure. Lily paid for her coffee and took a seat at a table by the window, where she could keep an eye on the counter. Outside, the October afternoon was bright and crisp, leaves in brilliant shades of red and gold dancing in the breeze. The kind of day her father would have suggested a hike or a drive to see the foliage. 20 minutes passed. Lily sipped her coffee slowly, watching as James efficiently made drink after drink. He hadn't looked in her direction once, though she was certain Meg had delivered her message. Was he deliberately avoiding her? Finally, during a lull in customers, James wiped his hands on a towel and approached her table. His expression was guarded, but not unfriendly. I'm sorry I didn't call, he said without preamble. I did talk to my father, but he's been reluctant to get involved. Reluctant? Lily repeated. What does that mean? Did you tell him I found out about my twin? James glanced around the coffee shop, clearly uncomfortable having this conversation in public. Look, I get off in an hour. Can you wait until then? We can talk properly. Lily nodded. I'll be here. The hour crawled by. Lily tried to distract herself by reading a novel she'd brought from the library, but she couldn't focus on the words. She kept watching James as he worked, searching for resemblances to the man in the old photograph. The same tall build, similar features. But there was a carefulness about James that made her wonder what he was holding back. At 3:00, James untied his apron and disappeared into the back room. He emerged a few minutes later wearing a light jacket over his blue shirt. Ready? He asked, stopping by her table. They walked in silence for a block until they reached a small park. The weekend crowds had thinned as the afternoon cooled, leaving the park mostly empty except for a few dog walkers and a young couple playing frisbee. James led Lily to a bench overlooking a small pond where ducks paddled lazily among fallen leaves. The scene was peaceful, at odds with the tension Lily felt. I did talk to my dad, James began. I showed him a photo of you I took at the coffee shop and asked if he knew Robert Morgan's daughter. You took a photo of me? Lily asked, startled. Just with my phone, that first day when you came in. After you mentioned your father's name. James had the grace to look embarrassed. I was curious. My dad has mentioned Robert Morgan over the years, usually after he's had a few beers. Old stories about their firefighting days. What did your father say when you showed him my picture? He got very quiet. Asked why I was asking about you. I told him you'd been in the coffee shop, that you were looking for information about your father's past. James paused. And about your twin sister. And, Lily prompted when he didn't continue, and he said it wasn't his place to tell you anything, that some stories belonged in the past. James met her eyes directly. But he also said he's not surprised you've started asking questions now. What does that mean? I don't know. He wouldn't explain. James picked up a leaf that had fallen onto the bench between them, twirling it by its stem. But he did say that when he gets back next week, he'll meet with you. Hope rose in Lily's chest. He will? When exactly? Friday afternoon. He'll be at the museum all day, packing up the last of the exhibit. He said to come at 3:00, after the museum closes to the public. Thank you. Lily felt a wave of relief. Finally, she would get some answers. But Lily, James added, he wants me there, too. Why? I don't know. James shrugged. Maybe for moral support? This clearly isn't an easy subject for him. Lily studied James's face. There was something he wasn't telling her, but she couldn't figure out what. Fine. You can be there too. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the ducks. A cool breeze rippled the pond's surface, distorting their reflections. Can I ask you something? Lily finally said. That first day in the coffee shop, when I asked if you'd called me Firefly, you seemed genuinely confused. But I know what I heard. James sighed, still looking at the pond. Honestly, I don't remember saying that. But what? Sometimes I say things without thinking, phrases I've heard my father use, or words that just pop into my head. He turned to look at her. I've been having these weird dreams lately, about fire, about a little girl lost in the dark. Lily's breath caught. Since when? Since moving back to the area a few months ago. I grew up here, but I've been living in Chicago for the past decade. I came back to open a branch of my architecture firm and to be closer to my dad. He's been having some health issues. And the dreams started after you moved back? James nodded. My dad says it's just stress from the move, from starting a new office. But sometimes I wake up with words on my lips that don't make sense to me. Like Firefly? Maybe. James looked troubled. I really don't remember calling you that. But if I did, I'm sorry if it upset you. Lily wasn't sure what to make of this. Could James have called her Firefly unconsciously, repeating something he'd heard in dreams or from his father? It seemed far-fetched, but no more so than the elderly woman in the grocery store using the same nickname. What about the woman who called me Firefly at the grocery store? Do you know anything about her? James shook his head. No idea. What did she look like? Lily described the elderly woman with white hair, blue eyes, and pearl earrings. James didn't show any sign of recognition. Could be someone who knew your family in Riverdale, he suggested. This area isn't that big. People move between these small towns all the time. Maybe, Lily agreed, though it still didn't explain how the woman knew her childhood nickname. A nickname her father hadn't given her until after they moved to Cedar Springs. James checked his watch. I should go. I have plans tonight. He stood, hesitating. Lily, whatever you find out from my father, I hope it brings you peace. So do I. As James walked away, Lily remained on the bench, watching the ducks until they disappeared into the growing shadows as sunset approached. She felt both closer to and further from answers than ever. James would be at the meeting with his father, Did that mean he was more involved in this mystery than he was admitting? Was he part of whatever secret his father and her father had kept all these years? Lily pulled out her phone to call Emma. As the screen lit up, she saw a text from an unknown number. "All these years, and you still look just like her." Lily's fingers trembled as she stared at the message. No name, no explanation. Just those 11 words that sent a chill down her spine. Like her. Like her twin? Lily tried calling the number, but it went straight to voicemail with no personal greeting. She left a shaky message. "This is Lily Morgan. Please call me back. I need to talk to you." Before ending the call, she sat frozen on the bench, staring at the text. Who had sent it? How had they gotten her number? And most importantly, what did they know about her twin? The ducks had disappeared now, the pond dark and still as twilight settled over the park. Lily wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite her sweater. Whoever had sent the text knew her sister. And for whatever reason, they had chosen now to reach out, just as Lily was uncovering the truth about her family. The coincidence felt too perfect to be chance. Something was happening. Pieces moving into place, secrets rising to the surface after 3 decades of silence. And somehow, Lily was at the center of it all. The next few days crawled by with excruciating slowness. Lily checked her phone constantly, hoping for a response to her voicemail, but the mysterious texter never replied. She tried calling the number several more times, but it always went straight to voicemail. Maybe it was a wrong number, Emma suggested over lunch on Tuesday, or someone playing a weird joke. It wasn't a joke, Lily insisted. They knew about my twin. How many people could possibly know that? Well, your dad must have told someone. The secret got out somehow. Lily pushed her salad around her plate. 3 more days until I meet with Thompson. It feels like forever. At least you have a meeting scheduled, Emma said encouragingly. That's progress. After lunch, Lily returned to the library to finish her shift. As she was shelving books in the history section, Mrs. Peterson approached. "Lily, there's someone asking for you at the front desk." "For me?" Lily rarely had visitors at work. "Did they give a name?" "No, just asked if you were working today. It's an elderly woman. She seems quite determined to speak with you." Lily's heart skipped. The woman from the grocery store? She quickly put away the remaining books and followed Mrs. Peterson to the front desk. There, waiting in the small seating area, was the same white-haired woman who had called her Firefly at Fielding's grocery. Today, she wore a navy blue dress with a cardigan, her white hair neatly styled, pearl earrings catching the light. "There you are," Mrs. Peterson said. "Lily will be able to help you now." The elderly woman looked up, and for a moment, Lily saw a flash of recognition in her eyes. But then, confusion clouded her features. "Hello," Lily said, approaching cautiously. "I'm Lily Morgan. You asked to speak with me?" The woman frowned slightly. "Did I? I'm sorry. I'm a bit confused. I was looking for someone who works here." "That's me," Lily said, sitting in the chair beside her. "We've met before, at Fielding's grocery last week. Do you remember?" The woman's frown deepened. "I don't believe so. I would remember meeting. Such a lovely young lady." Lily felt a prickle of unease. Was this the same woman? She looked identical. Same white hair, same blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, same pearl earrings. "You called me Firefly," Lily prompted. "Said I have my father's eyes." "Oh dear." The woman shook her head. "I'm afraid you must have confused me with someone else. I don't recall that at all." Lily studied the woman more carefully. There was no hint of deception in her expression, just genuine confusion. Either she was an exceptionally good actress, or she truly didn't remember their encounter. "I'm sorry to have bothered you," the woman said, gathering her handbag. "I should be going." "Wait," Lily said quickly. "Since you're here, may I ask your name?" "Martha. Martha Ellis." "Ms. Ellis, did you ever know a man named Robert Morgan?" "He was my father." Something flickered in Martha's eyes, a shadow of recognition. "Morgan? The name does sound familiar. Was he tall with reddish-brown hair?" "Yes, that's him," Lily said eagerly. "I'm not sure," Martha said slowly. "My memory isn't what it used to be." Lily reached into her bag and pulled out one of the photographs. From her father's box, the group shot of the Riverdale firefighters. "Is this him? My father is here in the front row." Martha put on reading glasses and examined the photo. Her eyes widened slightly as she studied the faces. "Yes, I know these men. This was at Riverdale Hospital, wasn't it? The volunteer program?" "Hospital?" Lily repeated, confused. "This is the Riverdale Fire Department." Yes, of course." Martha nodded. "The firefighters who volunteered at the children's ward? I was a nurse there for 30 years. Lily felt a surge of excitement. A connection to her father's past, at last. "So you did know my father?" "I knew all the volunteers. They were good. Men coming to spend time with the sick children." Martha handed the photo back to Lily. "That's me, see? In the background." Lily looked more closely at the photograph. Sure enough, in the background, partially obscured by the row of firefighters, stood a much younger Martha in a nurse's uniform. "I can't believe I didn't notice you before," Lily murmured. "We're often overlooked, nurses." Martha smiled faintly. "Always in the background, while the doctors and, in this case, the firefighters, get the attention. Ms. Ellis, would you have time for a cup of tea? I'd love to hear more about this volunteer program." "About my father?" Martha hesitated, then nodded. "I suppose I could spare a little time. There's a nice tea room just down the street." Lily checked with Mrs. Peterson, who agreed to let her take an early break. 10 minutes later, Lily and Martha were seated in Teacups, a quaint shop that served British-style afternoon tea. The volunteer program was started in 1982, Martha explained, as she stirred sugar into her Earl Grey. Young children who were hospitalized for long periods often became depressed, withdrawn. Someone had the idea to bring in firefighters, local heroes, to boost morale. And my father was one of these volunteers? Oh yes, Captain Morgan was. Wonderful with the children. He would bring little gifts, tell them stories about brave firefighters. The children adored him. Martha smiled at the memory. He had a special way of giving each child a nickname, something to make them feel special and brave during their treatments. Lily's heart quickened. Nicknames? Yes. A little boy afraid of needles became Trooper. A girl who loved music was Songbird. It helped the children feel less like patients and more like, well, children. Did he ever use the nickname Firefly? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Martha's eyes grew distant, remembering. Firefly. Yes, I believe he did. For a child afraid of the dark, perhaps? The details fade after so many years. Lily wanted to ask more, but Martha suddenly seemed tired, the energy draining from her face. Are you all right, Ms. Ellis? Just an old woman's fatigue, Martha assured her. My mind isn't as sharp as it once was. Some days are better than others. Do you still live in Riverdale? Lily asked, changing the subject. No, I moved to Cedar. Springs, 5 years ago, after my husband passed. My daughter lives here with her family. Martha sipped her tea. It's a nice town. Peaceful. They chatted a while longer about Cedar Springs, about Martha's nursing career, about the changes in medicine over the decades. But when Lily tried to steer the conversation back to her father or the volunteer program, Martha became vague, her answers growing confused and contradictory. "I should get you home," Lily said eventually, noticing Martha's increasing fatigue. "May I call a taxi for you?" "That would be kind. My daughter usually drives me, but she's at work today. Do you have her number? I can let her know where you've been." Martha opened her purse and removed a small card with emergency contacts. Lily called Martha's daughter, explaining briefly that she'd met Martha at the library and they'd had tea. "Thank you for looking after her," the daughter said, sounding relieved. "Mom has good days and bad days. Her memory comes and goes." "She seemed to remember my father clearly," Lily said, "from the hospital volunteer program." "That doesn't surprise me. Her long-term memory is usually better than what happened yesterday. The doctors say that's typical with her condition." After arranging for Martha's safe return home, Lily walked her out to the waiting taxi. As Martha was about to get in, she suddenly grasped Lily's hand. "You know, he never stopped looking," she said, her voice stronger, clearer than it had been all afternoon. "Never gave up hope." "Who?" Lily asked. "My father? What was he looking for?" But Martha's moment of clarity had passed. She looked confused, again blinking at Lily as if seeing her for the first time. "I'm sorry, dear. I must have been thinking of someone else." Before Lily could respond, Martha was in the taxi, and it was pulling away from the curb. Lily stood on the sidewalk, watching until it disappeared around a corner. Martha Ellis had known her father, had seen him work with sick children, giving them nicknames to help them feel brave. But her memory was unreliable, slipping in and out of focus like a radio losing its signal. Still, her final words echoed in Lily's mind. He never stopped looking, never gave up hope. What had her father been searching for all those years? Or rather, who? Lily checked her watch. She needed to get back to the library for the remainder of her shift. But her mind was racing with new questions, new possibilities. Friday couldn't come soon enough. By the time Lily arrived at the Regional History Museum at 2:45 on Friday afternoon, her nerves were stretched thin. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with questions, theories, and fears about what Michael Thompson might tell her. The museum was quiet, most visitors having left as closing time approached. A sign at the entrance announced, "Final Day, Heroes Among Us, a Century of Firefighting," closing at 3 p.m. Zoe, the young receptionist, recognized Lily immediately. "You're right on time. Mr. Thompson is expecting you. He's in the back office." She pointed down a hallway. "Last door on the left." Lily followed the directions, her heart pounding harder with each step. The door was ajar, voices murmuring inside. She recognized one as James's. The other, deeper, rougher with age, must belong to his father. She knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Come in," called the deeper voice. Lily pushed the door open to find a cluttered office filled with boxes and artifacts. Standing by a desk, covered with papers, was James, looking uncomfortable in a button-down shirt and khakis. Beside him, a tall man with silver hair and familiar features studied Lily with intense blue eyes. Michael Thompson was in his late 60s, his once dark hair now mostly gray, his face lined with age but still handsome. He had the same tall build as his son, the same shape of jaw. but his eyes held a weariness James's didn't. The look of someone who had seen too much and carried the weight of it for too long. "Lily Morgan," he said, his voice a deep rumble. It wasn't a question. He knew exactly who she was. "Mr. Thompson," Lily replied, stepping forward to offer her hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." He shook her hand firmly, his gaze never leaving her face. "You look just like your mother." "So I've been told. Please, sit." Thompson gestured to a chair across from his desk. James remained standing, leaning against a filing cabinet as if ready to bolt at any moment. Thompson settled into his desk, chair with a slight wince. "Old injuries," he explained, noticing Lily's concern. "Occupational hazard of firefighting." An awkward silence fell. Lily had rehearsed what she would say, but now that she was face to face with her father's old friend, words failed her. Finally, Thompson spoke. "James tells me you've been asking questions about your father, about your family." "Yes," Lily managed. "I found something in my father's attic. Photos of me as a toddler with a twin sister I never knew I had." Thompson's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of his desk. "I see. I need to know what happened to her. Why my father never told me about her. Was she—" Lily couldn't bring herself to finish the question. Was she what? Dead? Thompson's voice was gentle despite the blunt words. "No, Lily. Your sister didn't die." Relief and confusion washed over Lily in equal measure. "Then where is she? Why weren't we raised together? Why didn't Dad ever tell me about her?" Thompson sighed heavily, exchanging a glance with James. "It's a long, painful story, one your father wanted to protect you from." "I don't need protection," Lily said firmly. "I need the truth." "Fair enough." Thompson nodded, as if making a decision. "But first, tell me something. What do you remember about your mother's death?" Lily blinked, surprised by the question. "Nothing, really. I was only 3. Dad told me she had a heart attack suddenly. That's all I know." "And what about your childhood before Cedar Springs? Do you have any memories of Riverdale?" Lily thought hard. "Just fragments. A red swing in a backyard. A cat named Cookie. Nothing substantial." Thompson seemed to be weighing his words carefully. "Your father and I met at the Riverdale Fire Academy. We went through training together, rose through the ranks together. He was my best friend." His eyes grew distant with memory. "When he met your mother, Sarah, it was like watching someone find the missing piece of themselves. They were perfect together." "I've read some of Dad's journal," Lily said. "He wrote about how they met. Fell in love. But the journal stops abruptly around the time I was born. There are pages torn out." Thompson nodded. "I'm not surprised. Those would have been the hardest pages to write." "Why? What happened?" "Your parents were overjoyed when they found out Sarah was pregnant with twins, 2 little girls. They'd been trying for a while. And this seemed like a blessing." Thompson paused. "The pregnancy was difficult, but the birth went well. You were both healthy, perfect little babies." "What were our names?" "Both of our names?" Lily asked. "You were Lily, and your sister was Rose. Sarah loved flower names." A faint smile crossed Thompson's face. "2 little flower girls, your father called you. Identical in every way, except for the small birthmark Rose had on her left wrist. Tiny crescent moon." Lily unconsciously touched her own right wrist, smooth and unmarked. "We were 3 when Mom died. What happened then? Why were we separated?" Thompson's expression darkened. "Your mother didn't just die, Lily. There's more to the story than a simple heart attack." He took a deep breath. Your family was camping at Lake Aurora. You and Rose were playing near the water while your parents set up the tent. Your father turned away for just a moment to help Sarah, and when he looked back, Rose was gone. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. Gone? You mean she'd been taken? Kidnapped? Thompson's voice was heavy with old grief. The police searched everywhere. The entire fire department joined in. We combed those woods for weeks. But there was no trace of Rose. No witnesses. Nothing. Oh my God, Lily whispered, her hand covering her mouth. Your mother? Thompson hesitated. Sarah was devastated. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She spent every waking moment searching for Rose, calling authorities, putting up posters. The stress was too much for her heart. 3 weeks after Rose disappeared, Sarah collapsed at home. Heart attack. She died in the ambulance on the way to the Per hospital. Tears welled in Lily's eyes, not just for the mother she barely remembered, but for the unimaginable tragedy her family had endured. After Sarah died, your father was broken. Thompson continued. He had lost his wife and one of his daughters in the space of a month. He couldn't bear to stay in Riverdale, where every street, every park reminded him of what he'd lost. So he moved to Cedar Springs, to start fresh, with you. But why didn't he ever tell me? Lily asked, her voice breaking. Why keep Rose a secret? At first, he thought you were too young to understand. You were barely 3, already confused by the move and your mother's death. Then, as time passed, he worried that knowing about Rose would only bring you pain, that you'd feel guilty for being the one who wasn't taken, or that you'd spend your life wondering about a sister you might never find. Did the police ever find out who took her? Lily asked. Thompson shook his head. No. There were theories. A stranger abduction. Someone who had been watching the family. Maybe even someone who knew them. But no solid leads. Did Dad ever stop looking for her? Never. Thompson's voice was firm. He followed every possible lead for years. Even after he moved to Cedar Springs, he would drive back to Riverdale whenever there was a new tip or sighting. He hired private investigators. He kept in touch with the detectives. Every year on Rose's birthday, he would call me to ask if there was any news. All those weekend trips he took, Lily murmured, remembering the times her father would leave her with a neighbor for a day or two. He told me he was going fishing or to car shows, but he was still searching for Rose, wasn't he? Yes, right up until the end. Thompson's eyes were filled with compassion. He wanted to protect you from the pain, Lily. He thought he was doing the right thing. Lily wiped away tears. I understand why he kept it from me when I was little. But I'm an adult now. He should have told me before he died. He was planning to. James spoke up for the first time since Lily had entered the room. Dad, show her. Thompson opened a drawer and removed an envelope. Your father sent me this letter 3 months ago, just a week before he died. I think you should read it. Lily took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in her father's familiar handwriting. Michael, the doctors say my heart is failing. Weeks, maybe months left. I've decided it's time to tell Lily the truth about Rose. After all these years, she deserves to know she had a sister, even if we never found her. I've kept the secret too long, thinking I was protecting her, but I see now that I was really protecting myself from having to relive the worst day of my life. I've gathered the old photos, the newspaper clippings, everything. When Lily visits next weekend, I'll show her and tell her everything. I hope she'll forgive me for keeping this from her. I hope she'll understand that not a day has passed that I haven't thought of Rose, haven't wondered where she is, if she's safe, if she's happy. Keep an eye on Lily for me after I'm gone, old friend. She'll need someone who knows the whole story. Always, Robert. Fresh tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. He was going to tell me when I visited, but he died before I got there. He had the heart attack the day before you were supposed to arrive, Thompson confirmed. It was very sudden, just like Sarah's. Lily tried to process everything she'd learned. Her sister hadn't died. She'd been kidnapped. Her mother had died of stress and heartbreak. Her father had spent his entire life searching for his lost daughter. "You said my father asked you to keep an eye on me," Lily said, looking up from the letter. "Is that why people have been calling me Firefly lately? Have you been watching me through others?" Thompson looked genuinely puzzled. "What do you mean? Who's been calling you that?" "First your son, at the coffee shop." Lily glanced at James, who shifted uncomfortably. Then an elderly woman named Martha Ellis at the grocery store. Both of them called me Firefly and seemed to recognize me, but then denied it or acted confused. "Martha Ellis?" Thompson repeated. "The nurse from Riverdale Hospital?" "Yes, she told me she was a nurse when the firefighters volunteered with sick children. She said my father used to give the children nicknames like Firefly." A strange expression crossed Thompson's face. "Martha has dementia, Lily. Her good days and bad days come and go. But I haven't seen her in years, and I certainly haven't asked her to check on you." "And I already told you," James added. "I don't remember calling you Firefly. If I did, it wasn't intentional." Lily frowned. "Then who sent me this text?" She pulled out her phone and showed them the message. "All these years, and you still look just like her." Thompson stared at the text, then at James, then back at Lily. His face had gone pale. "When did you get this?" "Last Saturday, after I spoke with James at the park." "Who sent it?" "What number?" "I don't know. There's no name. And when I call the number, it goes to voicemail." Thompson stood abruptly, wincing at the movement. "Lily, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I didn't send anyone to check on you. I didn't tell anyone to call you Firefly. And if Martha Ellis and my son both used that name, and now you're getting mysterious texts?" He paused, his expression grave. "I think someone is trying to send you a message. Someone who knows about Rose." "Who?" Lily asked, a chill running down her spine. "I don't know. But after 30 years of silence, it can't be coincidence that all this is happening now." Thompson's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Something has changed. Someone knows. Something." The implications hung in the air between them. Could Rose herself be trying to reach out? Or someone who knew what had happened to her? "What do I do?" Lily asked. "Be careful," Thompson warned. "We don't know who's behind this or what they want. Let me make some calls. Reach out to old contacts. In the meantime, don't respond to any more texts from unknown numbers." As Lily was about to respond, her phone buzzed in her hand. A new text from the same unknown number. "The Lake House, Saturday, noon. Come alone." She showed the message to Thompson and James, their faces mirroring the shock and unease she felt. "The Lake House," Thompson murmured. "The one in the photo?" Lily nodded. "The one where you and Dad are fishing." "That was our place," Thompson said. "We bought it together before we were married, used it for weekend fishing trips. After Rose disappeared, your father couldn't bear to go there anymore. I bought out his half." "Do you still own it?" Lily asked. "Yes, but I rarely use it these days." Thompson's expression was troubled. "Lily, you can't go there alone. This could be dangerous." "But it could also be a chance to find out what happened to Rose," Lily countered. "I have to go." "Then I'm coming with you," James said firmly. "The text says to come alone," Lily reminded him. "I don't care. You're not meeting some mysterious stranger by yourself at an isolated lake house." James crossed his arms, his stance suddenly protective. "I'll stay out of sight if you want, but I'll be there." Lily looked back at Thompson, who nodded. "James is right. Don't go alone. In fact, I'm coming too." Tomorrow, Lily would go to the lake house where her father and Thompson had once spent happy weekends fishing. She would face whatever, or whoever, was waiting for her there. And perhaps, at last, she would learn the truth about the sister she never knew, and why strangers had started calling her by a childhood nickname that only her father had ever used. Saturday morning dawned bright and cool, the kind of perfect autumn day that would normally have lifted Lily's spirits. Today, however, her stomach churned with anxiety as she prepared for the meeting at the lake house. She had barely slept, her mind racing with questions. Who had sent the text? Why now, 3 months after her father's death? Could it possibly be Rose herself, reaching out after all these years? The latter thought seemed too much to hope for, yet Lily couldn't stop herself from imagining what her twin might look like now. Would she be Lily's mirror image, or would 30 years of separate lives have shaped them differently? Lily dressed carefully in jeans, a warm sweater, and sturdy boots, practical clothes for a lake house visit, though she doubted practicality would matter much today. As she was about to leave, she hesitated, then went to her jewelry box and took out the silver dragonfly necklace her father had given her. She fastened it around her neck, touched it once for luck, and headed out. The plan was for Lily to drive to the lake house alone, as the text had instructed. James and his father would arrive separately and remain hidden, close enough to help if needed. Though Thompson had wanted to contact the police, Lily had persuaded him against it. If this was Rose, or someone with information about her, police presence might scare them away. Lake Aurora was about an hour's drive from Cedar Springs, nestled in the hills where Riverdale and Oakville's boundaries met. As Lily followed Thompson's directions, the roads grew narrower and more winding, autumn foliage creating tunnels of gold and crimson above her car. She recognized the lake before she saw the house, a flash of deep blue water through the trees, just like in the old photographs. Then, around a final bend, the lake house came into view. A modest cabin with weathered wood siding, green shutters, and the distinctive stone chimney she remembered from the photos. Even the fish weather vane still turned slowly on the roof, tracking the gentle breeze. Lily parked in the gravel driveway, noting there were no other cars visible. Maybe whoever had sent the text was already inside, or perhaps they hadn't arrived yet. She checked her phone. 11:52 a.m. She was early. As agreed, she texted James. "I'm here. No one else visible. Going in." His reply came immediately. "We're nearby. Be careful." Lily approached the cabin slowly. The porch steps creaked as she climbed them, the sound unnervingly loud in the quiet surroundings. She tried the front door and found it unlocked. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly well maintained. Simple, rustic furniture filled the main room. A sofa facing a stone fireplace, a wooden dining table with 4 chairs, a small kitchen area. Large windows offered views of the lake, sunlight dancing on the water's surface. On the dining table sat a photo album, obviously placed there for her to find. Lily's hand trembled as she opened it. The first page held a photo she recognized. One of the twins as toddlers, identical in their matching dresses. But the pages that followed contained photos she'd never seen before. A young girl with red hair, growing older in each successive image. School photos, holiday snapshots, graduation pictures, a childhood and adolescence documented in photographs. Rose's childhood, the one Lily never got to share. The final page held a recent photo of a woman who could have been Lily's reflection, though her hair was shorter, her smile more reserved. On her left wrist, barely visible, was a small crescent-shaped birthmark. "Hello, Lily!" the voice came from behind her. Lily spun around to see the woman from the photograph standing in the doorway of what must be a bedroom. She wore jeans and a green sweater almost identical to Lily's, a coincidence that sent a shiver down Lily's spine. For a long moment, the sisters simply stared at each other, taking in the mirror image that genetics had created despite 30 years of separation. "Rose," Lily finally whispered, the name feeling strange on her lips. The woman nodded, her green eyes, their father's eyes, filling with tears. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't," Lily admitted. "I didn't know who was texting me. I'm sorry for the mystery. I wasn't sure how to approach you directly." Rose took a tentative step forward. "May I sit?" Lily nodded, and they both sat at the table, the photo album between them like a shared history. Neither had fully lived. "How did you find me?" Lily asked. "When Dad died?" Rose began. "You knew our father?" Lily interrupted, startled. Rose's expression softened. "Not until about 5 years ago, and not as well as you did." She took a deep breath. "I should start at the beginning. The real beginning." Over the next half hour, Rose told her story. She had been taken from the lakeside by a woman named Eleanor Gray, a woman who had lost her own child to illness, and, in her grief-induced psychosis, convinced herself that one of the Morgan twins was meant to be hers. "She renamed me Emma," Rose explained. "She moved us constantly, always afraid of being found. We never stayed in one place more than a year. She homeschooled me, kept me isolated. I didn't have a normal childhood." "Did you know you were kidnapped?" Lily asked. "Not until I was 16. I found newspaper clippings Eleanor had kept, stories about the missing Morgan twin. That's when I learned my real name, that I had a sister, parents who had been searching for me." Rose's voice grew tight with old anger. "But by then, Eleanor was dying of cancer. I couldn't bring myself to turn her in, sick as she was, and I was afraid. Afraid of what would happen to me, afraid of meeting strangers who were supposedly my family." "So you stayed," Lily said softly, understanding. Rose nodded. "Until she died when I was 18. After that, I tried to build a life for myself. College, jobs, always with this secret weighing on me. I'd look up information about the Morgans sometimes, but I was never brave enough to make contact." "What changed?" Lily asked. 5 years ago, I finally worked up the courage to find our father. I didn't identify myself at first, just said I was researching the history of Riverdale for a project. We met for coffee." Rose smiled sadly. "He knew immediately. One look at me, and he knew his lost daughter had come home." Lily's heart ached, imagining her father's shock and joy. "Why didn't he tell me?" "He wanted to, but I wasn't ready. I was still coming to terms with my real identity, still building a relationship with him. He respected my wishes, though I know it hurt him to keep the secret from you." Rose reached across the table, hesitantly touching Lily's hand. "I'm sorry for that. It was selfish of me." Lily didn't pull away from the touch. "So you've been in contact with Dad for 5 years? Where do you live?" "Oakville. Close enough to visit him regularly, but not so close that we'd run into each other by accident. Rose paused. He told me all about you, showed me pictures. I felt like I knew you, in a way. But I knew nothing about you, Lily said, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. He was going to tell you. We both were. We had a plan. He was going to tell you about me when you visited that weekend. And then once you'd had time to process it, I would meet you. Rose's eyes filled with tears, again. But then he died suddenly, and everything changed. I was devastated, and I didn't know how to approach you in your grief. So, why now? Why the mysterious texts, the strangers calling me Firefly? Rose looked confused. What strangers? James Thompson at the coffee shop. Martha Ellis at the grocery store. Both called me Firefly out of nowhere. I don't know anything about that, Rose said, frowning. I only sent you the one text yesterday after James told me he'd spoken with you about Dad. We've been dating for a few months. He didn't know about me being your twin until this week? James knew our father called me Firefly? No, at least I never told him that. Dad used to call me that too, though. Suddenly, the pieces clicked into place in Lily's mind. Her father had given both his daughters the same nickname, his little lights in the darkness. James and Martha hadn't been part of some conspiracy. They had genuinely encountered Rose around town, called her Firefly because somehow they'd heard the nickname, and then been confused when they met Lily instead. Martha Ellis knew our father from the hospital volunteer program, Lily explained. She probably met you recently and recognized you as Robert Morgan's daughter. That makes sense, Rose agreed. I volunteer at the senior center in Cedar Springs. She's probably a resident there. And James, Lily began, has been helping me work through all this, Rose finished. He's been my rock these past few months. The front door opened then, and James entered, followed by his father. Thompson stopped, short at the sight of the two identical women sitting at the table. Rose, he said softly. I thought it might be you. Rose stood and embraced the older man. Uncle Mike. It's been too long. Uncle Mike? Lily repeated. Your father and I were like brothers, Thompson explained. I was Uncle Mike to both of you. When you were little? He looked between the sisters, wonder in his eyes. I never thought I'd see you together again. I can't believe Dad found you and never told me, Lily said to Rose. He almost told me too, James added. A few months ago, he hinted that he had a secret that would change everything. Said I'd understand soon enough. He moved to stand beside Rose, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. I think Dad was finally ready for us all to be a family. Again, Rose said. He'd been working up to it for years. Why Firefly? Lily asked suddenly. Martha said Dad gave nicknames to sick children at the hospital. But why that particular name for us? Don't you remember? Thompson asked. Both of you were terrified of the dark as toddlers. Screamed bloody murder at bedtime. Robert used to tell you stories about fireflies. How they brought light to the darkness. How they were tiny, but brave. Called you his little fireflies to help you be brave too. Lily touched her dragonfly necklace. I always thought it was just me. That he gave me the nickname when I was 5. He kept using it because it had been important to both of you, Thompson said. His way of keeping Rose present in your life, even if you didn't know it. As the afternoon stretched into evening, the 4 of them remained at the lake house, sharing stories and memories. Rose brought out more photos of her gradual reunion with their father, of places she'd lived, of her life now as an art therapist working with traumatized children. I think my own experience made me want to help kids who've been through difficult things, she explained. When it grew dark, Thompson built a fire in the stone fireplace. The dancing flames cast a warm glow over the cabin, over this strange new family formed of old bonds and fresh connections. "What happens now?" Lily asked as they prepared to leave. "Between us, I mean." "Whatever we want," Rose said. "We have 30 years to make up for." "I'd like to try, if you would." Lily looked at her sister, the twin she'd never known yet, somehow. Always missed, a presence felt through its absence. "I'd like that too." Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. As they walked to their cars, Rose pointed upward. "Look!" Among the trees at the edge of the lake, tiny lights flickered on and off. Real fireflies, dancing in the gathering darkness. Dad used to say they were nature's way of reminding us that even the smallest light can push back the darkness. Rose said softly. "He was right," Lily replied, taking her sister's hand. "He usually was." As they stood watching the fireflies, Lily felt a sense of completion she hadn't known was missing. She still had questions. There would be time for those in the days and weeks to come. But for now, it was enough to know that the mystery had been solved. The lost twin found. The family circle somehow, improbably, complete again. When a man at the lake rental office called out, "Good night, Firefly." As they passed, Rose and Lily both turned, then looked at each other and laughed. No longer a mystery, but a shared identity. No longer a painful reminder of loss, but a connection to the father who had loved them both, who had never stopped hoping his little fireflies would one day find their way back to each other. And as they had, through darkness and time and the winding path of fate, they had found their way home. That was the end of the story, the echo of memories. Where are you listening from today? If you enjoyed this emotional tale of long-lost twins and family secrets, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more such interesting stories. Don't forget to share with your friends and family to spread kindness and awareness. Every share helps our community grow and allows more people to experience these meaningful narratives. Thank you for listening.